Okay, so yesterday was a super interesting day. We discussed about Lightning Network today, how to onboard merchants, how to make Lightning wallets more performant, more intuitive, so how to keep scaling the Lightning Network. This morning we have a program of panels, and the first one is one for the ages. We're going to discuss about the state of the technology as it is today. So please welcome for the State of the Lightning panel, Roy Sheinfeld, Ryan Gentry, Steve Lee, John Carvalho, and Bastien Teinturier. Please. You have 3 mics, guys, so be good. Like brothers, you share them.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Thank you so much for coming to the second Lightning Summit. Thank you, Philly, for organizing everything. Thanks, Fulgur, Oleg, Vitalik. I don't see Oleg here. Oleg had a birthday yesterday, so happy birthday if you hear us. So unlike other panels, I'm actually excited about this one. I see John too. John and I meet only on Lightning panels, so. And typically it's very boring, but I think this one's going to be interesting because I'm actually interested in this discussion. I think I've met most of you in the first Lightning conference in Berlin, right? 2019. Steve, you were there? No, but you started Spiral in 2019. So I think we're all kind of Lightning veterans, at least 5 years in Lightning. So maybe my first question is, in Berlin 2019, Ryan, you were still with Multicoin before joining Lightning Lab. John, you were with Bitrefill, if I remember correctly, before you started your own Lightning journey. Bastien, you're a software developer in a sync, but now you're the CTO. So we were all made a lot of progress in our Lightning journey. Did you expect to be where we are now, 5 years in?
I definitely expected the type of growth and progress that we've seen in terms of the network getting bigger, network getting more performant, having, like with the news yesterday that Coinbase is joining with Lightspark, right? That was kind of, I remember at the time, especially from kind of the crypto point of view, the big mindset was everybody's like, oh, well, Lightning's never going to take off until all the exchanges are on board, right? I remember that very clearly as being kind of a refrain that kept being said. So I think in that terms, yeah, right, like, ideally it would have happened sooner than that. But I do think that it has progressed very nicely and that we've grown quite a bit and the network has definitely improved and gotten to a much more usable state. What I will say is that I didn't quite expect or see coming, I thought there would be a lot more of the like micropayments on the internet type stuff and a lot more of the instant payments, peer-to-peer stuff, a lot more of the kind of net brand new use cases, streaming money type things. That's what I remember being really excited about at the time. And while, I think it's kind of not bad, and maybe I was just wrong about kind of like where Lightning was going to take off to begin with, I think kind of the cross-border remittances, normal kind of everyday payments, and then kind of like financial use cases for just moving money around that seems like kind of the dominant use case for Lightning today. Just kind of, that wasn't what I expected. So it has grown maybe about like I expected, but for all of the different reasons.
Yeah. I share that same sentiment. I'd say that 4 or 5 years ago, I expected, or at the time I knew Lightning was complicated. What I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years is that it's even more complicated than I thought at the time, and I suspect everyone here would feel the same way. So it's very complicated. I also would say that progress has been very meaningful, but slower than expected. Whether it be from like the LDK project perspective or Lightning overall. And I'm not a developer, I'm the like PM type person, so I of course, always would like to see it faster, but the good news is that the progress is up and to the right. I mean, we're not like going backwards. Like Lightning today is absolutely better than the year before and the year before that. And the roadmap ahead is, there's a lot of clarity in terms of a lot of the known remaining challenges of Lightning. There are known fixes, and it's just a matter of time. I think there's also some fundamental challenges of Lightning that we should talk about in this panel as well, which are either unsolvable because they're fundamental to Lightning, or the solutions are uncertain. So I think that would be worth talking about.
And specifically about the use cases, did you expect the use cases that we see right now, did you expect them to kind of take the lead?
I didn't, yeah. I've always been, had belief and optimistic about use cases, but uncertain on timing. So I guess that's, I've not been disappointed with that. I actually think like Stacker News as an application is quite compelling. It's my favorite Bitcoin app. I mean, beyond just like a wallet and saving and hodling, Stacker News is my favorite application to use. I think it could become like a Reddit killer, and a key reason why is because of Bitcoin. So that remains to be seen. But if it does, that would be amazing. And of course, Nostr and using Zaps, while that's niche on global scale, it does have good engagement on like a per user basis. So that's nice to see as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it feels like in 2019 in Berlin, it was really a lot of excitement, like startup-like excitement, where everything was brewing, and usually in that kind of projects, you expect either exponential growth or just disappearing after a few years. And what's interesting is that I think we've always thought ourselves that this was never what was going to happen with Lightning. And since then, we've only seen basically linear growth, and most people are not okay with that. They say, oh, but where is hyper-Bitcoinization? Where is exponential growth? And I don't think that's the way for Bitcoin. And I think that linear growth that we've been seeing is really nice, and it means we start reaching people who are not Bitcoin experts. At that time in 2019, I feel it was really the point where Lightning started becoming usable for the first time, but usable for people who understood Bitcoin and who understood the basics of Lightning. It was then that we introduced the first version of Phoenix. I remember that we were in the hotel before the conference, finishing it and trying to create GIFs to advertise it on Twitter. And it really felt like that was, for us at least, the first step towards making Lightning usable for people who didn't have to understand a lot of technical details. But even back then, I think that first version was really bad. So comparing it to now, nobody would use a wallet that had those features done that way, because a lot of things were really weird and impossible to understand for normal users. And it took us 5 years to get to the point where we are today. But I think that today, we're at a point where there are many wallets that offer great UX. It's much easier for people to start using Lightning and Bitcoin without understanding anything about it. And if you do the experience of getting someone to install, someone who doesn't know much about Bitcoin or Lightning, getting them to install a Lightning wallet and getting them set up and showing them how easy it is to just receive money without registering an account with anyone, without sharing your identity, without sharing a lot of important stuff you don't want to share, it's quite magical. I've been doing it a lot recently with a lot of people, and they always say, whoa, that's it? I have money right now, this is Bitcoin? And I feel getting to that point, since it took a long time and progress was linear and slow, we tend to forget that we got there. But this is really huge, and this is something that we should really be proud of. And I hope that we're able to make more and more people use Bitcoin seamlessly with that.
I would just say, like, referring back to Berlin, like, that was probably peak optimism for Lightning, for sure. Like, I just remember, it just felt like everything that was on stage was just amazing and magical, and I remember like Bottle Pay sponsored the whole thing, and they had gotten funding, and everybody was excited about Bottle Pay. My main memory was being so excited about Bolt 12. I remember Rusty presenting about it and thinking, oh my God, I was working at Berryfield. I was like, this solves so many things that I would like to have solved in Lightning. And yeah, I'm still excited, just in a much more reserved way. I have been maybe very pessimistic lately about it, but this comes from like that many years of experience. So yeah, I would say, agreeing with all of you to some degree, that it is not as far along as we all were hoping in this magical way. It was much harder to get even where we are now than we thought it would be. Back then, another big part of then to now, I was super excited about the idea of doing tokens on Lightning, and that was what got us into experimenting with RGB and things like this, and we've since dropped all these things. And so just a lot of learning experience between now and then, yeah.
Actually, one more thing that I forgot to mention. I think one thing I didn't foresee 4 or 5 years ago is the value of Lightning being like a settlement layer, interoperable glue between a lot of other systems. And because we don't have a silver bullet yet, and maybe never, on how to scale Bitcoin to everyone and preserve, Bitcoin's on-chain properties.
We'll get to scaling Bitcoin topics shortly.
There's going to be lots of experiments, lots of innovations, and so we have different technologies like various eCash initiatives, cashew impediment, and ARC, and state chains, and now like side chains, and all of this activity. I think it's great to have all that activity, but one thing we see across all of them are integrate with Lightning as the way to pay.
Have a Lightning interface.
Even within like Fedimint or Cashew, like intermint settlement is using Lightning. So that's an enormous win for Lightning, and I think that's a slam dunk. Like, I don't see that. I think Lightning has won that. So we should all feel really good about that. So when we maybe get to some of the challenges of Lightning, we should always remember that it does look quite successful in that arena.
I think that we got to a point that Lightning, like, there's no chance Lightning go away. And in that regard, I want to ask you if the reason we started the Lightning Summit is because we felt that the Lightning ecosystem is maturing. Like, we're kind of growing up, there are less hobbyists, more professionals, more Lightning companies, and we wanted to take Lightning to the next level in terms of the ecosystem. Do you think we're ready for prime time? Do you think we're ready for mass adoption?
Absolutely not. Bitcoin can't handle mass adoption. Lightning couldn't handle mass adoption, even if Bitcoin could. Like, the structure of it just isn't in place. Not many of us have even figured out how to run like fully scaled nodes. Like, yeah, we have, I don't know what the peak is, but some tens of thousands of channels in a node. You guys probably have the largest one, I don't know. But like, we're talking about millions of users and killing Visa. Like, this is a whole other stratosphere, and I don't think that we could do it, not right now.
It's interesting because, just to build off what you said in your previous answer, I actually think peak optimism for Lightning for me was 2021 with like the huge wave of people running Umbrel nodes, with like the plebnet and everything. Because what I had always personally really wanted to happen from Lightning was, anybody could run a routing node on like a laptop or a small machine in their home and like kind of bring about the home server revolution, right? I was really excited about that idea. And I think now, to like actually answer your question, what we have, one thing that I did not expect, 4 years ago, and I just didn't have, experience in running real big production enterprise software systems, is like, the needs of me running a Raspberry Pi at home versus the needs of like Coinbase or Kraken, running Lightning for millions of users is like dramatically different. And the amount of infrastructure that needs to go in for, high availability, failover, like remote signing, database backups, just like even scaling the software tools to support, thousands of channels instead of tens of channels, right? Like all that type of these scaling limits that we've hit, particularly within the L&D ecosystem, like that has been something that definitely building out that infrastructure and maintaining all the things to support these bigger users just takes away from new feature development, right? Just naturally. And like, I'm sure the async team sees that. I know the LDK team is seeing that now, right? That you guys are maturing and you have kind of external users that are using it. Like when you have to start maintaining these feature sets for them, like you can't push forward on new roadmap items quite that much. So I think that part of scaling up Lightning to get to where we can support these really big entities has taken a lot of work, but I do think that's necessary, and the fact that demand is pulling that investment in that infrastructure and in the professionalization of these systems, I think is a really good sign. Do I think that we could support Visa level transaction volume tomorrow? It would be tough, right? Like probably not. Do I think that the fundamentals of Lightning and like how I see it scaling as more and more payment volume comes through the network and kind of pulls more investment in professionalizing the setups and bringing more people online, like I actually do think that the fundamentals are there. I really do. I think the fundamentals are there. I think the growth will persist kind of naturally, linearly, like Bastien said, until we get to a point where, yeah, we are in the big leagues. So I think we're on the right path, for sure. And I think the one other thing that's just an interesting anecdote is I remember, like, I think it was early 2021, before the El Salvador news, we had a call with Jack Mallers at Strike. And this is, peak bad boy Jack Mallers, dropping F-bombs on CNBC and stuff like that. And he kind of like sheepishly asked, he's like, so, like for Strike, are you guys working on any accounting tools? Like, we need to pay taxes in April, right? That was like the first kind of sign that was like, oh man, we're really professionalizing. Like, we're growing up. Our needs are different than like, we need to support all these new kinds of payments. So that was kind of like, it's been a big push, a big wave to kind of grow up collectively, but I do think we're on the right track and we've built out a lot of really good infrastructure to support kind of the next wave of companies that are coming on board.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole is that it's being really honest and transparent about where issues are, where trade-offs are, and the fact that it's really much, much, much harder to build a decentralized version of Visa than to build a centralized version of Visa, and that we're not going to get there in one day. We may never going to get there to exactly the same thing. We have inherent trade-offs that make some things more difficult. And it's okay. And I think that what I like is that we're not rushing into those things and taking short-term decisions that would be harmful in the long run. On the contrary, it's really frustrating because sometimes things are really going slow. For example, Bolt 12 was first announced in 2019 in Berlin. We're only getting there now. Hopefully, by the end of the year, we're going to start having first versions rolling out. But it took 5 years for something that, as an end user, looks really simple, but is not really, if you want to build it correctly. And we're really lucky that we have the time to build those things correctly, that we have the funding and we have the support to make sure that we do those things the right way, and we don't rush into poor technical decisions that could be really harmful in the long run. So it is frustrating at times, but I think it's okay because right now people don't want mass hyper-Bitcoinization. We want to build something that is usable by anyone, but I don't think everybody needs Bitcoin now. I hope most people, anyone who needs it will be able to use it, and that's what we are building towards. But we don't need to be able to support billions of users now. We may not even need to be able to support billions of users in 10 years. Maybe it's going to take us more time. Maybe we will never get to a point where a billion of users want to use Bitcoin, but we are still slowly progressing, and people who may need Bitcoin are discovering it today, are getting better and better tools to be able to use it for things that really matter, to solve problems that they are not able to solve with anything else. And I think that's the important thing that matters. It's not really the number of people using it, it's that people who really need it are able to do it, and that there's nothing else that does it better than Bitcoin.
I just want to clarify something around this discourse. There are two things that were kind of confusing: the enterprise B2B use cases and the non. I think when you talk Bastien, you always think non-custodial peer-to-peer Lightning, and that's a bit confusing for everyone. I guess when I asked if Lightning is ready for prime time is more on the B2B side of use cases. Is Coinbase adopting Lightning? Would users be happy with that integration? John, what do you think?
I'm not sure what you mean. Well, you think that whatever you're asking, we don't know what the user experience of Lightspark.
I'll tell you where I'm coming from. Like Cash integrated Lightning. We saw Kraken integrating Lightning. I didn't see it move the needle when it comes to Bitcoin adoption, Lightning adoption.
I don't know about adoption, but I mean, I was part of getting Bitfinex to be the first large exchange to support Lightning, and they're still one of the largest node sets in the network. So I don't know how you measure adoption.
How Bitfinex measure adoption? I think it's still very small percentage from the interaction with the exchange.
Yeah, I think that measuring it through exchanges is probably not the best way, because how they would measure is whether Lightning brought them new users. And I don't think that the use case of an exchange is Lightning. And so it's more of a payment method.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be an exchange, but it can be, what I'm trying kind of to say, it can be a B2B use case.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core of Lightning, for one of the things I've definitely learned, something I always suspected pretty early on, but now I'm like more hardcore about it, is that no matter how much we fail, if we fail at the Lightning narratives or some of them, the spectrum that won't fail will always be B2B. Because just a payment channel from a peer to a peer, and then being able to string together a small network, that's just always going to be something that will be useful.
And it seems we're getting closer. Like for me, the fact that we kind of, I never had that vision of everyone running a Lightning node in their homes, because it's not even a hardware problem, it's a software problem. It's inherent to Lightning that you need to be professional in order to run a Lightning node. So the fact that we kind of gave up on the everyone runs a routing node dream, I'm happy with that. And I'm happy that we have a more professional managed Lightning nodes. And I feel with all the power in the Lightning ecosystem, we are getting to a phase that we're kind of ready for prime time adoption.
I just add a nuance that I'm happy about those things too, but I think that he is right that you still need it to be that anybody could do it.
Yeah. Steve?
I'm not sure if I have much to add. I mean, I'm confused on the B2B, B2C in the sense that did Cash App integrate Lightning well for themselves? Yes, and it works fine. But does it have a lot of traction? Your impression is correct, I think. I mean, it's actually similar to like River's report. It's grown a lot, but it's grown from tiny to small. So it is up and to the right, and I'm sure that's the case for Kraken and every service, and it'll be the same with Coinbase, I'm sure. But it does work fine, and there is growth. So as long as we maintain that growth, we only need 2 more 1,200% growths to reach Visa. So let's do that over the next 6 years.
So you're subscribing to the linear growth. You guys don't think there will be hockey stick in Lightning adoption? Ryan, stable coins on Lightning?
Yeah. So I would before I get to that, and thank you for the layup. I would say first that squaring the non-custodial use case at the edge, which all of us want to happen and want to thrive, and it's important, not your keys, not your coins, for Bitcoin, for that use case to work. Squaring that kind of difficulties with the enterprise B2B core of the network, really getting healthy and working well, which I'm also extremely happy with, is just networks like this, from highways to, airplanes to, oil pipelines to telecommunications networks, which I bucket Lightning in the same category of, all of them have a very well-known thing called a last mile problem, right? Where it's exponentially more expensive to lay the last mile of fiber to the people in rural areas than it is to lay fiber in the core of a city, right? Because there's less people served at the last mile, so the dollars it takes to install the infrastructure is the same for a mile of fiber in a city versus out in rural, but you're not able to kind of recoup that investment as well. So this is a well-known thing, and I think Async, Breeze, and many of these mobile wallets have done, I think, an excellent job of mitigating this last mile problem and like providing a really good experience. And there's tons of great work going on with async payments, with kind of like waking up the phone, with splicing and all the different things on liquidity management to try and like mitigate that issue. But just fundamentally, there are a lot more difficulties at the edges of the network than there are in the core of the network, right? If you're able to just manage 5 BTC channels with other professional node operators who are watching the node, or have a team of people watching the node every day, right? That's just much easier to provide a good solution than one person who like makes a payment every 2 weeks and doesn't sync their node or anything like that, right? It's just it's much harder. So
it's also about the economics.
yes, and the economics as well, for sure. So that's one thing. I just wanted to make that point. So do I think there's going to be hockey stick growth? I actually think that kind of combination of two things. I think combination of one, with stablecoins on Lightning, kind of the whole thesis, and I presented it yesterday, is that the market for Bitcoin payments is small, right? Bitcoin is monetizing. It's clearly a store of value. That narrative has escaped the lab and like gone mainstream. Using it as a medium of exchange, like, why would you spend the thing that you think is going to double in value or 5x in value over the next year, right? Some people have to. Some people, they don't have other options. But just your average everyday person, the market for Bitcoin payments is small. The market for dollar payments is very big. One of the biggest in the world, if not the biggest. And so I think that has the opportunity to bring a lot more users to Lightning for its economics, for its settlement reasons, for its global reach. But just you can do that with dollars instead of with Bitcoin. And I think we've seen kind of some early proofs of this, like, again, from Strike kind of moving their model from Bitcoin payments to we'll spend Bitcoin on your behalf, you spend dollars. That was kind of like an early kind of UX proof point. It was like, oh, maybe that's kind of what people want a little bit more. So I think a combination of that, of retrieving other markets, and then while I'm still very passionate about the non-custodial use case, is because that allows you to scale your business at the speed of a software company. Right? If you don't need kind of the login hangups and the KYC hangups, and you can just scale very quickly where you download the app and then boom, you're going, that's where you can really get like viral growth, right? That's where you can really get a killer app that comes online and, I send a group message to my friends. I'm like, oh my God, you guys got to try this. This is so cool. And then they all sign up, they tell their friends, and then, in a couple weeks you have 1 million users signed up, right? Like, I just think that the overhead required to sign up for an app that is, more custodial or enterprise, I kind of think would hamper that sort of viral adoption. So I do think it's very important to keep solving those last mile problems so that we can get, and maybe it's the combination of those two, new markets and lower barrier to entry for users, and new virality is what allows for real hockey stick growth.
Yeah, just one more. So to add on to that, we haven't really talked about what drives demand. I think we will get exponential growth when we have use cases that are compelling. And maybe it is Nostr taking off, or Stacker News, or gaming, which there's a few attempts at that, but hasn't really taken off yet. Or gambling, I think, like global gambling on soccer or something. Micro bets, like prop bets on soccer globally, I could see taking off. But we don't know. So I think 5 years from now, something will have taken off, and then we'll all point back to that and be like, oh, it was obvious. But we don't really know right now. But that will be, clearly we can get all the infrastructure and products and protocols perfect, but you still need consumer demand.
We'll never get them perfect, don't worry. John?
So sorry, what was the original question? I think we've mutated.
If you are kind of seeing hockey stick growth on the horizon through either B2B use cases or...
I am skeptical. The use case of Lightning is high-frequency payments. You can kind of juice that a little bit by using an LSP and say all your payments, but what are the...
Yeah, that's...
Check. What are the killer apps that would actually require high frequency that wouldn't also be more efficient if they weren't high frequency? And I don't know that there's... I know for sure B2B is one, but beyond that, I can't speculate.
But even in the B2B category, you said exchanges that's simply not the right use case. So what is the right use case?
No, I didn't say. B2B, I think, is the core use case.
No, I mean
Yeah.
exchanges. From the B2B perspective, you said exchanges, that's not the right way to measure Lightning adoption.
Oh, no, I said, there's a context. I wouldn't measure Bitfinex user growth as success of Lightning because it's a payment method, not their product.
So on the B2B angle, like remittance, what's the use case that
Just settlement between businesses. Basically, like exactly what Bitfinex does was with BitRefill. I think it was the first example of this, like just a payment channel where one is providing a service or product to the other's users, but instead of having credit terms, you can just have dynamic settlement. So every time somebody buys a gift card on Bitfinex, what's happening in the background is Bitfinex is taking money out of their account, and Bitfinex is paying BitRefill in one channel or two channels or something. So you have this highly efficient, no credit terms, no trust required, completely dynamic relationship. Lightning, that's a killer use case for Lightning. It's not used as frequently as I thought it would be, but it will always be valid. Anything on top of that, it's like, okay, it's mostly going to be measured in contrast to on-chain efficiency. So you're going to say, okay, can I do at least 3 or 4 transactions to justify even having a Lightning channel? And how much can I raise that number so I don't have to keep making more channels or making more on-chain operations? This is still going to be pretty limited. And another issue I see with a hockey stick vision is that the on-chain really limits that possibility. Like, what will happen over time, in my opinion, is that the cost of Lightning will basically trend towards the cost on-chain. And so as the on-chain fees rise, the Lightning fees will rise too. That's why the nano payments thing was never going to be a thing, because it's just, nano payments are barely justifiable on a computation level, never mind attaching Bitcoin to it.
Just something I would like to highlight as well is that it's really hard. In Lightning, there is no single publicly visible metric that lets you measure success. It's really hard to measure success. It really depends on what use case you are focusing on. And by design, everything that happens in the network is usually private between the people who are involved in the payment. So for example, a use case like what John describes, only the 2 parties using that channel would know that there's a lot of volume going in there. Everyone else will just never know it. So people who only focus on number of nodes in the network, for example, to measure growth, are really focusing on the wrong thing. I think that in the long run, or at least what we've been seeing, is that the number of public nodes and maybe even public capacity of the network has been staying quite stable or maybe sometimes decreasing. But actually the volume has been increasing a lot because this is just a pipes system. So velocity of money moving inside the pipes is something that you cannot easily measure and share publicly. So it's really hard to measure success, and it's really hard to know what you want to be looking at for success, because I still think we don't know what the best killer apps are for Lightning. We want it to be general enough that people can come up with new ideas on how to use this technology for something that we haven't thought of. And that's what I like, is that I think we potentially enable a lot of things that cannot be done with standard payment methods. So I still expect to be surprised by what some people are going to build with Lightning, and those are going to be killer use cases for some people.
Yeah, I actually think there are some killer apps that, to your point, people aren't aware of the volumes that are going through these apps. LN Market, for example, I think people will be surprised by the volume that they process based on their Lightning node capacity.
Tell us more.
I was thinking out loud a little bit. I think there actually might be a metric that you could measure. It'd be slightly abstracted, but what you could do is say, choose any metric you choose of Lightning growth, but at the same time, on-chain fees staying the same or going down. So basically, you're getting more output of Bitcoin, but the fees aren't going up. So you're basically moving scale from one network to the other. That would be an honest measurement.
Going forward, guys, what do you think we need to focus on Lightning?
Yeah, I think the focus needs to be on kind of, 2 things in my mind, which are the 2 things I mentioned earlier. One is because now we have a stable network, right? I think we can all agree the network is stable and it works. Payment success rates are pretty high. I think it's time to like really go out and try and acquire new users, try and experiment with new use cases, try and go attack new markets. Because if Lightning, again, if you look at Lightning as just a generic payment network, right, competing with all the other ways to make payments on planet Earth, right, like I think it is very cheap or very low cost, you're not supposed to say cheap, very low cost, very fast to settle, very, the global reach is something that every other payment network would envy, and I think it works. So I think going out and attacking new markets is very important. But then I think also continually like lowering the friction to onboard new users. That's always been a pain point with Lightning, and it's something that is, always, we are continually, collectively as an ecosystem, lowering and trying to work because, people are busy, people have different priorities, they just want payments to work, they just want it to be a utility. It's only like the nerds in this room that really want to care about like how their channels are configured and like how fast their node is syncing. Other people just want to press a button and just have it work. And so I think that kind of onboarding experience is something that we like continually collectively need to be lowering the barrier to entry for.
I think no KYC. Let's not lose sight of that. And and it's, I talked about Bolt 12 yesterday, but it's broader than just Bolt 12. That's just like one piece of the puzzle. But personally, why do I work on Bitcoin? It's to preserve properties from cash that people have used for forever in the digital world. And it's really hard. We have massive challenges to do no KYC. I'm worried about.
Can we do no KYC?
Well, it's a good question. It's a huge risk, especially around like LSPs and regulators. I worry about those being choke points. So for individuals around the world, scaling. First of all, scaling is hard. But even for any level of scaling, being able to actually provide that last mile liquidity without requiring KYC, I think is going to be a challenge. And but I think it's essential. Like
But what's the game plan?
Okay, I'll give my best attempt, but I'm seeking other feedback on that. I think like the LSP spec group, which is met yesterday, and a lot of people here are working on that, including you guys. I think that's one answer. So we want so maybe we don't have every user running an Umbrel in their home, but we do want more than just like Synonym, Breeze, and Block running LSPs. We don't want like just a dozen global LSPs. We want thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. So working on standardization, making it as lowering the boundaries to being able to do that, be it both technical and financing, is important. And it's definitely not easy. I'm not like super confident we're going to achieve that, but I think we need to work towards that. I think that will help a lot. Because if we do get scale there, then that becomes difficult to enforce regulatory-wise. And also, the more global it is, the better. Like it shouldn't just all be in the US or Western markets. So that's one thing we can do. And then, we can also reinforce culturally within the development community and the Bitcoin community the importance of no KYC, because it is hard. I think it's easy to, as Craig Ross said, this erosion of principles, because it's really hard. And also for Spiral, it's easier because we don't have to make a profit. We're not a startup like my other fellow panelists here. All of you guys have to pay your employees and figure out a business model, and you have shorter term needs. So we definitely have a luxury, but so it's even harder as an entrepreneur to stick with that. But I encourage all of you to do your best, and everyone in the audience.
Until we'll go to jail. John?
So as far as KYC and censorship, I would say the dynamics are like this. You have on one side, the more decentralized Lightning is, the more it sucks, the less utility it has. the more centralized it is, the more censorable it is. So you really have to try to find the sweet spot, which is, like he said, you kind of have to optimize for both, because that provides the most access to be any type of user, either one that is stranded somewhere in the network, or having sub-networks that don't even reach the
But
rest of the...
inherently, you can't optimize for both.
Well, what you can do is, the way to optimize for both is to allow for both. And you can't stop somebody from becoming really large if that's what the market wants, or Lightning becoming really decentralized because that's what the government wants. You can't avoid the trends of what the market will choose, but you can allow for them. And so...
But you optimize for one.
I guess as a company, you wouldn't want to be working on both. I think that it would be nice to see people that really prioritize one, and other companies that really prioritize the other. And I think with the LSP specs, that's kind of what we talk about. But like I mentioned yesterday in the LSP meeting, like if we allow any of us to get too big, we will get regulated, and we will get censored, and we'll get more regulations. Then as far as answering your question, as far as what we should work on, it's probably a little easier for me to say what we shouldn't work on, and I'll say that. But as far as what we should, like, anything that improves user experience and removes complexity for the user is going to give Lightning a better chance. And anything that provides reliability from the LSP and provider level is going to give Lightning a better chance. So I would say working on the actual scaling for LSPs and those concepts, and things like splicing and making sure those are widely adopted for user experience and saving money and this kind of thing. Those are probably the areas. But I also think making the right decisions is choosing what not to work on. And I think that working on things that, for example, eCash bridging over Lightning, tokens bridging over Lightning, I personally think these are distractions. I think those are going to be some costs that don't actually lead to as much outcome as the other priorities. And I can't stop anybody from doing them, or I can't stop them from being trendy, but I think they are ultimately going to all end up as trends.
My point of view is more going to be on the engineering side. So because I'm more really seeing all the potential issues, technical issues we have. So I think that our focus has already been for the past year or two, and is going to be for the years coming, to work on everything that makes it, since the main issue with Lightning is handling liquidity, making sure that your liquidity is well allocated, because that's what makes you win or makes you survive in an environment that's really competitive. So any feature that we can do to make it easier to move liquidity to where it's going to be more useful and makes it cheaper to do so by reducing our on-chain footprint are things that are not that much user visible, but are really important to make the network more efficient. And by being more efficient, it's going to cost less fees, so it's easier to open for anyone to use. So those are things that they are not at all low-hanging fruits. They are really hard, and making those things, those protocols secure and efficient takes a lot of time. But those are things that I think is really important, and we are working on, and it takes a while. And also making sure that the network is stable enough, works well enough, keep on improving reliability of payments, reliability of channels, are things that take a long time, are a lot of effort, because it's hard to work on secure decentralized protocols, but it's really challenging and interesting. And if we want anyone to start really depending on that, looking at Lightning and saying, oh, this thing has been working for years, it seems stable, it's just been great for anyone who uses it, so now we can build on top of it. We want people to look at Lightning and say those things and think that this is something stable they can easily build on. So anything that we can do to make sure that it just works better, doesn't need to add too many new features, I think, because having a global payment system that just works without, and that is really open to anyone, is already a huge feature in itself. So making sure that this core feature works as well as it can and is as secure as it can is, I think, time worth investing. So I think this is one of the things that we're going to be working on a lot in the past years, in the next years.
I just wanted to chime in on John's point about optimizing for both decentralization and centralization at the same time. So like Lightning Labs is a developer infrastructure company. We don't directly engage with end users. So we actually that is our whole philosophy, is kind of let us focus on kind of the protocol layer, the infrastructure layer, the developer tools layer. We want a million flowers to bloom, on top of the L&D infrastructure as a kind of platform, right? We want all these developers going out, building companies, building startups, focusing on their specific centralized vertical, and having, tons of them all growing and competing the Lightning Network collectively together is how we end up with a decentralized network, right? And so that has been that has been how, the network has grown over the last 4 years, has been, us trying to lower the barrier to entry for founders and entrepreneurs to get up and running on the network and just letting them focus on acquiring users while we focus on making the Lightning part work and hopefully making the Lightning part not take up a large part of their, mental capacity as they're running their business.
But even in that level, in the implementation level of the specific Lightning implementation, you see the diversity. L&D isn't really geared to serve non-custodial end users. That's what I meant by saying you can't really optimize for both. The fact that you're focusing on high availability, reliability, remote signer makes you kind of defocus from features that non-custodial end users need.
Yeah, it's, maybe one day when we're making, billions of dollars a year, we can do both, but just kind of at the current moment with a relatively small team, yeah, it's hard to do both. And you kind of have to pick one and focus on it, especially because the needs are so different. Right, it is very different, and I think that is kind of one of those things where, yeah, it is what it is. Hopefully, as we grow, we'll learn to walk and chew the proverbial bubblegum at the same time. But for the last little bit, definitely the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the squeakiest wheels have been the big B2B enterprise users that need bigger enterprise tools.
And I understand kind of the step-by-step approach, the incremental approach that you all kind of alluding to, but what about, you don't have dreams, like channel factories, LN symmetry, where's the next big thing, that's gonna transform the user experience? Why aren't we shooting for the moon?
Let's start down there.
Bastien? Okay, package relay, I understand you want low on-chain footprint.
Those are not even dreams anymore. I know they're coming. We're going to have those, so I'm really happy. Those were my dreams a few years ago, and now that they're happening, yeah, I'm thinking about the next things. But the next thing is really much harder because it's much more... The next big thing that could change a lot in the L2 ecosystem as a whole are some form of covenants on Bitcoin, something that's going to require a soft fork, so it's going to take a while, and it's been discussed for years. So I kind of stopped dreaming about L2 LN symmetry. I'm still hoping that it gets there, but the way it's going to get there is probably going to change a lot and still going to take a long time. So I've paused my dream on that and tried to optimize the current Lightning to fix a lot of the things that we can fix. And I think that thanks to package relay and all the Maple work, there are already a lot of things that we can improve that are going to be really nice for in the shorter term future. In the much longer term, yeah, I'm just an engineer, to be honest. I'm not a dreamer. I am in a way, but we'll see.
In the case of Lightning, at least, I think I'd rather leave the dreams to someone else. I think there's just so much work to do. There's so much complexity. I don't want more complexity in my Lightning vision. I just don't want it. I have no interest in it. I am a dreamer in very much in other senses, like when it comes to peer-to-peer and identity and web of trust and these things. But when it comes to Lightning, I think it's time to tone down the dreaming. I think that's how the question and the whole panel started with talking about how we were back in Berlin. Everything was just a huge, amazing dream. Everything was magic back then. The possibilities were no limit.
But without that spirit, I don't think we've gotten so far as we've gotten.
Right, but as he said, he was a dreamer, and then he through market forces became practical, and the same thing for me.
But That
in a way,
dynamic.
some of our dreams came true because 5 years ago, being able to pay for a beer using Lightning instantly and having almost no fees attached to that was a dream. And it's just that we became accustomed to it because it just works. We've done it.
We were able to buy beer in Berlin, but it was one out of 30 tries. So.
I'm just taking the context as your example was UTXO sharing, which is dreams are more complexity. And so in other words, the dreams of Lightning actually doing what it says on the tin, that's different than what else can we tack onto this. And I, like personally, like your example, I am extremely skeptical that UTXO sharing is a significant solution to anything.
That's the reason dreamers are moving to other technologies. Still.
I'll try to, since we're struggling to dream, I'll try to help us dream. But I mean, there's different levels of dreaming. These short-term dreams are really 5-year-ago dreams, right? Bolt 12, we already mentioned, was talked about 5 years ago from Rusty, and now we're still presenting. We've just gotten to a point where the Lightning implementations support it, but now we need the wallets to support it. So that's one of my dreams, is that we actually realize that over the coming years. Another quick one is just the LSP stuff that we mentioned. Like a dream there is that we actually don't have 3, but we have 3,000 or 30,000 globally, and it's a healthy, it's economical, etc. Other relatively near-term things is Taproot. Okay, then the next level. I guess I'm more encouraged to look at UTXO sharing. I mean, anyone who's been in Lightning for 5 years, we've always known that there's scaling limitations based on the block size. We can only do so many UTXOs. So if we truly want to try to create a silver bullet solution that does reach every person, machine-to-machine payments, etc., we have to either increase the block size or share UTXOs. I don't think there's any other answer. It's one of those 2 categories. I'm open to either, but as we know, increasing the block size would be a substantial effort. So I guess, yeah, I'm encouraged to explore sharing UTXOs. So I think staying on top of some of the recent proposals is good. Like timeout trees is one that a few of us have studied recently. It's not a panacea, but I think it's at least interesting to explore. It solves a lot of the current problems of scaling, but it has its own, as most proposals, there's trade-offs, and I don't know if those trade-offs are worth it yet. I think exploring things like fee insurance and sharing costs of unilateral exits, which would tie into a timeout trees proposal, but also other proposals, I think that's an interesting exploration. I think exploring fidelity bonds is interesting as maybe a way to reduce trust in an LSP if they have something at stake that they could lose. And then we can mishmash those together. But ultimately, it would lead to better scaling of on-chain Bitcoin properties to more users. More, less trust, more self-custody.
I guess my dream, I'm gonna first start with an analogy. I think the best analogy, or the analogy that I draw on the most to kind of think about how Lightning as a protocol is progressing and will continue to grow is VoIP, voice over IP. So for those that are unfamiliar, voice over IP kind of got started in late 80s, early 90s, and really, people had all sorts of dreams for it, right? They're like, one day you're going to be able to do all your phone calls over the internet. That's going to be amazing. But where it really started and first got traction was in kind of enterprise international phone calls. Do you remember that it used to cost $5 to call Japan, right? Or it was really expensive because these were all, telecom infrastructure was all kind of local fiat government operated systems, none of which talked to each other and which were very expensive to bridge, and there was not really any incentive to bridge. And so what VoIP did was it let people just route right around those inefficiencies between these fiat systems and really easily call at the speed of the internet, speed and cost of the internet. So that first caught on in enterprises who were looking to draw on more enterprise efficiency and lower their internal cost bills, right? So that was kind of the entire 90s and early 2000s. Until after years and years and years of just kind of grinding away with linear growth, business development, enterprise SaaS, et cetera, eventually you got to the point where there was a protocol that was really solid, really firm, had a bunch of developer tooling fixed and figured out, and an internet with a lot of bandwidth where you had Skype. And all of a sudden, Skype went viral, and this was like a retail application, a killer app for VoIP that went viral on the world and got millions and millions and millions of users. And that was kind of where you saw the hockey stick growth that now leads to, I have VoIP in my iPhone. And probably if you're connected to Wi-Fi, probably the vast majority of the phone calls that you make are over VoIP and you don't even know it, right? So like that kind of trend is how I see Lightning progressing. And real quick.
Just to complete your analogy, and we have voice over RP in Slack and Telegram. It's integrated into every app.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good addition. I appreciate that. So that is kind of like how I would like to see Lightning progress. That is my dream for Lightning. And I think right now we're at the stage where although it's exciting, it's not the dream, it's the slog of like enterprise adoption, right? Coinbase and then Nubank and Revolut and you go down the list of the fintechs. But I think to get to the point where then we have the Skype moment, I do think that is something that is predominantly going to be retail driven, and I think the enablement for that is something that solves the last mile problem that I talked about earlier. So like the dream for a channel factory for me, for UTXO sharing, would be, an LSP has a 10 Bitcoin UTXO that they've allocated on chain. From that UTXO, they're able to sell what are now kind of zero-conf channels non-interactively to users who show up, and they can kind of sell a non-interactive channel, commit that it could be confirmed in the future, and the user could always unilaterally confirm it on chain if they wanted to, but through some magic, the LSP is not able to spend that little sub-UTXO without the user signature. Right, so you're able to onboard these users into these UTXOs without on-chain channel actions. You're able also to splice liquidity in and out of these kind of sub-off-chain channels, without touching the chain, or maybe you have to update the chain, this output once a week or something. But you're able to essentially do what the LSPs are doing today, like what I think Async in particular is doing today is like a really good example. But instead of each of those liquidity management actions requiring a chain hit, it's able to be done off-chain. I think that's the dream, right? And the devil, of course, is in the details. One thing that I'm really encouraged by is it seems that, I know with Arc, we have actual working code, right? People have taken these ideas and these, high-minded things of how this could work and have actually gone and implemented it. And then figured out we need, CTV is not sufficient. Maybe we need this additional thing. And, we thought we had these big liquidity problems, but we, solved some of them and had some others. So I'm really encouraged by that. I think we will see a lot more of this momentum of people kind of taking these high-minded ideas and then actually implementing them. I really hope that this is something that Lightning Labs can start doing as well once kind of stablecoin saga is complete, that we can devote some resources to kind of scaling out these edges of the network, because I really think that that's kind of the next thing that enables this hockey stick growth, this kind of killer app Skype phase, and takes us from kind of core enterprise B2B software to retail everyday, end user applications.
Since this has become like a UTXO sharing, cheerleading session, I just want to offer a counter argument. So, what is the counter argument to that? The premise is if I can't afford my own UTXO, I need to share one, right? And so, if I need to share one, well, let me just complete the thought.
We're kind of out of time, guys.
Okay, I'll just complete the thought and I'll get the last word. So, if I can't afford my own UTXO, how can I afford credible exit?
Let's stop at that. Ryan, I asked for a dream, not a fantasy. Thank you so much. I feel like we could have sat here for another hour and talk about so many things. But I appreciate you guys working on Lightning. I also subscribe to the feeling that we've gone so much. We've done so much in the past 5 years. I'm very happy with the progress that we've made. I think also the metrics shows that. So looking forward to the next 5 years.
And just to add, I thought about it a bit more. I think that my dream as an engineer is that we can attract the dreamers and that the dreamers can realize their dreams on top of Lightning and that they can surprise us. And that's, I think, the goal for the next 5 years, that it's stable enough, usable enough, easy enough to integrate, that it attracts the dreamers and that we don't have to dream. People can do it for us.
Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Good work, guys. Thank you, bro.